What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, we're going to be talking about some early round draft strategy. If you have a draft pick here in your fantasy football drafts this year, between that 101 and that 104. Now, I've done nearly 200 plus fantasy football drafts already this offseason, so I've had a lot of chances to experiment with different strategies. And this specific strategy that I'm going to talk about today is the strategy that I've liked the most. When I'm finished with those drafts, these are the teams that I think look the best and feel like they have the best chance at winning a fantasy football championship. So we're going to be talking about that here in today's episode, hopefully helping you guys, if you have one of those draft picks, win your fantasy football leagues as well. If this is your first time on the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss any future content on the channel. And if you have a pick in the middle of the round or the later parts of the round, those videos are coming here later in the next week or so. So let's not waste any more time. Let's hop right into today's video and let's start talking about this strategy. All right, so as you can see, I kind of have this strategy breakdown on the screen here. Really what this strategy is going to be is probably a modified double hero running back. And I say modified because typically that hero running back is going to be taking one of those guys early on and not looking at it later into the draft. So maybe this is more of an anchor running back, but really what we're doing is drafting one elite wide receiver in the top of the first round. I think guys like Chase, Lamb, Jefferson, all of these guys are in consideration because at that 2-3 turn, the round 2-3 turn, it does feel like there's a ton of running backs that you can draft that all have a lot of upside in 2025. So we will grab two of those running backs in that part of our draft, and then we will focus on hammering out the wide receiver positions, focus on the quarterbacks and the tight ends, while keeping an eye out for best players available, and then having some upside picks later in the draft as well. Now, that is kind of the raw breakdown, the quick strategy breakdown for what we're going to be doing. I'm going to go through quite a few mock drafts that I have done, some against the computer just from each of the positions, so you guys can see over on Sleeper. That's what we're using to draft, so you can see how these teams have panned out, and then one of them against some real people, against people in our Discord. So that is going to be something we're looking at. I do want to kind of just preface this by saying as well, obviously when you're drafting, you have to know your league, you have to know your league mates, you have to know the tendencies of those players in your scoring settings. So that may be something that you really need to focus on early on in your drafts. And also you need to stay fluid during these drafts. Make sure that you never, pin yourself into a specific pick just because it is written on this screen. If there's a best player available, make sure you focus on grabbing the best players possible, because at the end of the day, if round 3 comes around and for whatever reason your league went 10 running backs off of the board in the first 2 rounds, or 12 running backs off of the board in the first 2 rounds, and you're looking at an elite wide receiver still on the board there with your second round or your third round pick, don't force yourself to take the RB 13 or 14 or 15 in drafts just because that is what the strategy says. Obviously, you need to make sure that you're paying attention to the draft board as well. But I have found that this strategy is very, very good, and it's very likely that a lot of the times you're going to be able to make this happen. So let's dive into some of these mock drafts and see how we've made that plan turn into action throughout some of these drafts. All right, so kicking it off here with this first mock draft, we are drafting from the 101. I did prioritize Chase. I said the elite wide receivers, like I said, Jefferson, Lamb could have been there as well. Lamb's ADP on Sleeper is fairly low. I think he should be going much higher in drafts than where he is right now. I would probably be taking him over Gibbs. I would be taking him over Henry and Puka, that all went ahead of him in this draft. But he's definitely in the top 3 of the elite wide receivers that I would be looking at as well. And worst case scenario, he is almost always available at the 104. So you can always get him in these drafts. Now, you do have that turn, like I said, where you have guys like Nakua, Neighbors, Amon-Ra, Nico, AJ Brown, Bryant Thomas, London. All of those wide receivers are coming off the board in that turn from the 1-2. So I do think you get a lot of elite running back options as well that kind of just find their way to you at this turn. The one we ended up going with was Jonathan Taylor, obviously a bell cow type of running back, and we paired that up with the second elite running back, or the bell cow running back that we were trying to target in this double hero modified running back, however you want to call it. You know what I'm saying. Kyron Williams at the 301. So that's what we ended up doing. Typically in this range, guys I'm looking at would be Bucky sometimes falls. Josh Jacobs is always somebody we can be looking at. Jonathan Taylor, Kyron Williams, and Chase Brown. In that third round pick, sometimes, you do have some of these guys go up a little bit higher. At that 304, worst case scenario, I don't mind pulling up James Cook if you're okay with, some of the stuff that's happening in the offseason. He's trying to get a new contract. I think he will. I don't think it's going to hold him out of games, but he's also a player that I think is in consideration there at that 3-4. But in this specific draft, we went with Jonathan Taylor and Kyron Williams. Now, rounds 4 through 7, Like I said, that's kind of where we're going to be hammering home the wide receiver position and or just focusing on best player available. Typically in this range for me, the best players available are the wide receivers. That's why I want to fill this out. And because we went with the double running back in that 2-3 turn, it does feel like we can add a bunch of wide receivers and still be safe because we have 2 RB1s on the roster already. So I ended up getting DK Metcalf, Cortland Sutton, Calvin Ridley, and Rome Odunze over the next 4 rounds. You can mix that up however you want. Guys like Devontae Adams are great picks. Jamison Williams is a good pick. Jordan Addison, Devontae Smith, DJ Moore. There's tons of great options here. Trying to target good players that can break out in good offenses is just typically the thing that I would like to do, or guys that are going to see a ton of targets. I think Metcalf and Sutton, even though they're not in the greatest of offenses, obviously Denver is a much better offense than what we project Pittsburgh to be. Those guys should be target hogs. Same with Calvin Ridley, and Rome Odunze is a player that I think can break out. So you don't have to love the player takes, but the wide receivers are going to be there. Pretty much all of these, even Xavier Worthy, if you wanted him, Ted McMillan, Jalen Waddle, there is a plethora of wide receiver options to take throughout those rounds. Now, rounds 8 through 10 is kind of where I listed quarterback, tight ends, and best players available. That's kind of the strategy for these rounds. I think there's a ton of value in the tight end room. There's still some very solid quarterbacks, and you can always find a guy that you can keep plugging into the lineup. So for this specific mock draft of the 101, we grabbed Mark Andrews as our tight end. I would have been just as happy grabbing a guy like David Njoku, a guy like Evan Engram, even a guy like Tyler Warren if you believe he's going to dominate the targets there in Indianapolis. But all of those guys in this range feel like really solid tight end options where you don't have to reach for one of the elite tight ends, and you can still get those spike tight end 1 weeks where they can probably still land within the top 5 if touchdowns go their way this season. I went Kyler Murray in the 9th round. He's a quarterback that I think is a little bit undervalued, has some rushing upside, which I do like to target. Other guys that you could look at would be maybe a guy like Bo Nick in this 8 to 10 round range. Maybe a guy like Justin Herbert, Jared Goff, Dak Prescott, even if you like him, Jordan Love, Brock Purdy. All of these names are players that I think can flirt with those quarterback 1 numbers on a week-by-week basis. Even Justin Fields, if you like the rushing upside of him. And then we went with Bashal Tutin as kind of that best player available, an upside pick for us. And that kind of leaks into rounds 11 and 12 where I said just focus on the upside. We went Trey Harris, rookie for the Los Angeles Chargers, and Dylan Sampson, running back for the Cleveland Browns with the Quinshon Judkins news. But really that is the focus and how we're making it happen. And you see it worked out fairly well in this mock draft. Now let's move on over to the 102 and we can kind of look at the same thing here. Instead of Chase, we go Jefferson. When we're looking at those 2 running backs, round 2 and 3, we still got Jonathan Taylor. We went Chase Brown in this one as one of the guys to target. For the wide receivers, rounds 4 through 7, it was still best player available to me. All of those happened to be wide receivers. I got Worthy, Devonta Smith, Calvin Ridley, and Rome Odunze. That 8th round, we still got Kyler Murray. David Njoku for us as the tight end in the 9th round. Tajay Spears as the best player available for us at the running back position in the 10th round. And then we went Trey Harris and Dylan Sampson again as those upside picks there in the later parts of the round. So you kind of see now at the 101 and the 102 how the same strategy in both of those draft slots ended up kind of having similar teams that have the same type of upside. Now again, looking at this mock draft here from the 103 against the computer, Jamar Chase goes to the 102 because Saquon Barkley went. That's probably not going to be super common, but maybe in your home leagues it will be. Jamar Chase, the 102, Justin Jefferson was our pick of the 103. I would have been totally fine grabbing CeeDee Lamb at the 103 had Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase come off the board. But then with those 2 running backs, Josh Jacobs, Chase Brown, those give us the RB1 upside that we want out of those 2 guys. Best players available and targeting the wide receivers, rounds 4 through 7. Cortland Sutton, Devonta Smith, Chris Olave, Rome Odunze ended up being the picks again. So love Rome Odunze's value. You can see I've drafted him in pretty much every mock draft here so far. So that's kind of how that has panned out again for us. Evan Engram was our tight end pick here in the 8th round. Kyler Murray, again, one of my favorite picks of value here in the 9th round. And then we went for our upside selections of Jaden Higgins, best player available in the 10th, Bashal Tutin, and Dylan Sampson to round out this mock draft. And let's go look at one more computer mock from the 104. As you can see here, Justin Jefferson was the selection. Again, if it was CeeDee Lamb who was the best pick available at the wide receiver position, more than happy to pull him off of the board. Bucky Irving and Jonathan Taylor were the 2 running backs that we ended up selecting there as our RB1s, with it's RB1 and RB2, but obviously the RB1 upside. For the wide receivers, DJ Moore, Jamison Williams, Ted McMillan, Calvin Ridley, Evan Engram again in the 8th round as the tight end. This one was a little bit different because we did have Kyler Murray where we were trying to push him to the 9th round. He didn't make it to us, so what I did was kind of just move up best player available. As I said, rounds 8 through 10 is that tight end, quarterback, and best player available. What I did was move up the best player available, which was Ricky Pearsall. Feel like he has some upside. And then I took Dak Prescott in the 10th round to be our quarterback here. So that's kind of just how we adapted that one when Kyler Murray came off of the board. Obviously, like I said, he's been a favorite pick of mine, but Dak Prescott in the 10th was just as good to me. And then there in the 11th and 12th, we went with some upside picks of J.K. Dobbins and Dylan Sampson. Maybe J.K. Dobbins is not as sexy of a name, I think, as like some of the rookies and some of the younger guys that you can take, but he should see a ton of volume, at least early on here for Denver. So I took him as an upside pick early on for this team. Now, you might be saying to yourself, look, Andrew, it's nice and great that you can do this against the computer on Sleeper every single time, but what happens when I have to draft against real people? Well, good thing we drafted against real people in this draft here with people from our Discord. They had no idea the strategy that I was doing going into it, so I wanted to kind of show you guys and prove to you this can still be done with maybe some minor changes as the draft goes on. Like I said earlier, staying water, staying fluid, making sure that you're focusing on, nailing the strategy, but also playing the board. So what we did here, we had the wide receivers come off of the board. It was Jamar Chase, it was Justin Jefferson. Both of those guys come off. I take CeeDee Lamb at the 103. Like I said, I'm more than happy to take him there. I think him and Jefferson are kind of 2A, 2B in fantasy football right now. Depending on the more information we get about Jefferson's injury, the hamstring stuff, I would be more than happy to move Lamb to my wide receiver 2 in my rankings. But overall, coming back to those running backs, Jonathan Taylor, Chase Brown. You had the opportunity to take Kyren Williams as well. Josh Jacobs almost made it to us, but there's still plenty of opportunities to grab those RB1s in those 2 slots there at the 2-3 turn. So we ended up grabbing them. Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, and Jordan Addison were the wide receivers for us. But then look, in the strategy, I said best player available and hammer home the wide receivers. We were doing that, but then I felt like the wide receivers kind of had a fall off after that 6'10. So really after Odunze goes to the 6'9, Ridley at the 6'6, Olave, a lot of these names kind of got pushed up the board a little bit, and I wasn't happy taking a guy like Khalil Shakir or Deebo Samuel in that 7th round. So what I did was take best player available, and to me that was Caleb Johnson. He ends up being the pick there in the 7th round. So we still hammered home the wide receiver a little bit and got a BPA there in the 7th round. For us in the 8th round, we got Travis Kelce, who fell a little bit in this draft. Then obviously we were kind of looking in this range for quarterback and best player available, but Kyler Murray got sniped right in front of us at the 8-9. He's a player that we were targeting, so I knew, hey, I like Dak Prescott late, Jordan Love's a good pick late, Jared Goff's a good pick late, Justin Herbert, Purdy, all of these options. So let's just take best player available with this next pick. I was looking at potentially going Ricky Pearsall, but I ended up going Jaden Reed here. I think he is a good best player available type of pick. And then what happened there at the 10th round, we could have easily taken Dak Prescott and he would have been, just fine. The same type of value pick, I think in the 11th or in the 10th there. But what I thought about was, hey, looking at my board, looking at this strategy, Mahomes and Allen are on the 2 teams here at this turn. They're very likely not taking a second quarterback just because this is a 1 QB league. So I can play chicken. Plus, even if they do take 2, I still have Goff on the board. I still have Jordan Love on the board. And worst case scenario, Drake May. So I played chicken here. I took best player available to me with an upside pick in Trey Harris. And then I took Dak Prescott in the 11th. I could have swapped those picks. I just felt like it was more likely I was going to get Dak Prescott to come back to me than it was Trey Harris. So I played the game. That's kind of what I talk about being water, being fluid, making sure that you're reading the board. That would be an example of doing that, but the strategy still remained the same. I still kind of accomplished the same exact goal. And then with that final pick, we took Jalen Wright. Didn't get Dylan Sampson to fall, didn't get Tootin to fall. We take Jalen Wright, who I still think has upside as a running back pick here. And that's kind of how we did it against real people. So really the only thing that changed here in this draft against real people than the other drafts that I was doing against the computers is we didn't get Kyler Murray and we pushed the quarterback one more round just because I was reading the board. Not because there was a lack of quarterbacks available to me, but just more so because I was reading the board. So we still kind of accomplished the same goal. Ultimately, all of these teams turn out to be pretty strong at the running back room because of those 2 anchor running backs, those 2 hero running backs that we're getting at that turn. You have the strong elite wide receiver 1 with a bunch of guys that have a ton of upside because we're hammering the wide receiver position in the middle rounds. And I still think we're getting good tight end play, good quarterback play by waiting until that round 8 to 10 type of range with some upside picks on the bench to hopefully get some breakouts later in the year. But this is kind of the strategy that I've been using. So I'm going to come back over here just one more time to show you guys the strategy again here on the screen, just as a refresher. I know we walked through all of those mock drafts fairly quickly, but what you're looking at doing if you have an early pick pick 1 through 4 in those fantasy football leagues, I think you should be taking an elite wide receiver 1 in round 1. Make sure you grab 2 RB1s in round 2 and round 3. That's going to be the RB1 and the RB2 on your roster, but we know those guys have top 12 upside with the ability to finish even higher in fantasy football. Rounds 4 through 7, I'm hammering home the wide receiver position. There's a ton of value there, especially on sleeper ADP, or you take best player available like we did with that example with Caleb Johnson when we did get those wide receivers to move up the board. Rounds 8 through 10 is the perfect sweet spot to grab the quarterback and the tight end of your roster, plus another player that is best player available. And then rounds 11 and 12 are those upside picks, trying to nail a breakout, guys that can be producers that you can maybe flip and trade later down the road, or just get some free production on your roster by nailing one of these picks. But overall, that's kind of the strategy that I've been using, and I feel like these teams turn out really well when I have them. Let me know what you guys think about those teams. You saw a couple of them through those mock drafts that we did, but let me know what you think about those teams and what you think about this strategy in the comments down below. But all right, there you have it. That is the perfect strategy, at least in my opinion, here for the early round of your fantasy football draft. I'm going to be doing similar videos to this for the middle picks and the later picks of your fantasy football drafts as well. So make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. You don't want to miss those, especially if you have some of those draft picks in other leagues. Also, make sure you guys are liking the content. If you guys have found something informative, entertaining, actionable, anything in today's video, if you just enjoyed it, make sure you hit that like button for me. It is the best free way to show this channel some support. And go join our free Discord. We are in our Discord helping you guys with your fantasy football teams 24/7, 365. And like I said, it's free to join, so there is no risk in doing that. But with all of that out of the way, I have nothing else for you guys today. So I'll see you on the next episode. But until then, peace out.